Welcome back to Pixels and Pints Up Late. This is our first one for 2024. Full breakdown of a single topic for the episode. I'm Dan. I'm joined today by Pete.
Howdy.
And Tom.
Hello.
And we're going to be trying one big beer each. But mine's a New Zealand one. Tom's is an Aussie one, and yours is an Aussie one too, isn't it, Pete? So
yeah, it is.
I'm the outlay here. My one is part of the New Zealand beer pack I bought just before Christmas that had some of the small god beers in it that I've done before. So tonight we're going to talk about evolution, positive character development over time for video game characters. David Jaffe, who was the director and part creator or sole creator of the first two God of War games, the old school God of War games, not the most recent 2018 and Ragnarok ones.
The Greek trilogy.
Yep. Spoke about a month ago about his dislike of the path that they took Kratos' personality on, his character development. He didn't like that they'd turned him into a father and a bit more of a nurturing character. I did make the guys watch the second video that he released that was obviously a follow-up.
Address the hate.
Address the hate. Because I think I completely agree with what he had to address in the second video, that he came across arrogant and petty in the first one, saying he didn't outright say it, but it was kind of like, oh, well, you stripped everything that I wanted in Kratos from the very beginning, and I wanted the character to do this. In the second video, he was more like, no, I get that a character has to have some sort of development and evolve to be interesting. I understand all this. And if you like the way that it's been taken by Santa Monica, perfectly fine. You're more than welcome to like it. But he was like, this isn't what I wanted, and I don't know how the longevity of this father-like figure, more gentle Kratos character has going forward. So we're going to talk Kratos and God of War. And we'll probably throw some other character developments in video
examples.
Games.
Some other excellent character
good
growth.
ones. Yeah. We're not going to get bogged down in negatives because we don't want to do negative ones. We threw some negative ones around ourselves, but we want to focus on the more positive side here.
I just before we move on, so just watching that latest David Jaffe video, like the follow up, he did liken Kratos to a Wolverine character, or he said he was originally designed to be a superhero, and acknowledged that like people like Superman do change over time, but that's a comic that's been going on for almost 100 years, and the rate of change is very fucking slow. And so, of course, it's had to go through he has gone through some fundamental character development. Superman is still Superman. And then he talks about, I thought it was interesting, he kind of adjusted what he was saying around Kratos in that he said that he thoroughly enjoyed the 2018 re-release. He thought it was interesting what they did with the character, but it was a plot twist and a new direction. And so his criticism is more of the second game, Ragnarok.
Yes.
And that it didn't have the same impact because they really have nowhere to go. That shock factor is gone now. Although he did say that he hadn't finished playing Valheim, so it'd be interesting to see what Valhalla, sorry. So it'd be interesting to see what he thinks about the follow-up and the obvious direction they're taking Kratos into the future.
And you've finished Valhalla now, Pete?
Yes, I have. Okay.
So I think going forward from this conversation, there'll be God of War Ragnarok and God of War Valhalla spoilers. So from this point on, do we want to talk about the beers before we go deeper into this? Because I can see us getting distracted and not talking about the beers until about halfway through.
I think that's it.
Has anybody? Oh, you've got yours.
Splendid idea.
What are you drinking, Pete?
I'm drinking.
Excuse me.
Brick Lane Brewing's Smoking Gun, which is a Spanish Cedar Imperial Cigar Stout at 10.6%. It's interesting. It's certainly complex. You get a lot of, obviously you get a coffee, like a black malt coffee base. It's quite acidic. almost. It's not soy sauce in a bad way, but it kind of has those properties. You do get some vanilla. I would say that it's quite subtle compared to how strong the coffee notes are. And then the rest, there's not a lot of smokiness in it. I'm surprised, given it's described as a cigar stout and it's called Smoking Gun. There's almost no smoke in it. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes while it warms up. I almost want to reserve judgment, to be honest.
I think that's fine on these episodes if we reserve judgment. Generally, seeing as we are drinking bigger stouts for this, let them do warm up a bit.
Yeah. I can already taste that it's starting to open up and the layers are starting to separate out a little bit, so it's easier to kind of pick them up. Certainly some spice in there. I don't know if cedar's the right word. I mean, when I looked it up on Untapped, and it does talk about it's designed to evoke the opening of a humidor with fine notes of leather, tobacco, black pepper, and sandalwood. So I'd say the black pepper is the spice I'm picking up. I'm not getting tobacco. I've got a humidor now, made out of cedar, so that the smell of the wood is quite familiar to me, and I'm not getting any of that. So we'll see how we go.
I can only imagine what a new one smells like. Must smell beautiful.
A new humidor?
It
is gorgeous. It is gorgeous. And if you get upmarket, if you get anything but shit cigars, the cigar tubes, even the Australian cigar tubes where they've had to repackage it with the plain packaging for the Australian government, they still leave a piece of cedar wood folded up on the outside of the cigar, so you can actually, you're supposed to light your cigar with it. So instead of lighting the cigar directly, you light the cedar and then the wood lights the cigar. That smells gorgeous. But anyway,
look out for our offshoot episode, Pixels and Cigars, coming to you next winter.
Yeah.
Scotches and Stogies?
Scotches and Stogies.
Now I'd fucking definitely start that podcast if we had any more time.
Chuck a patent pending on it would be cool.
Cigar at a bike. Yeah. Who's up next? Tom, have you tasted it enough?
I have tasted it. I've had several sips of mine. I am drinking Boat Rocker Brewers and Distillers from Victoria. This is one of their Ramjet series. It's in glass. It's been a long time since I've had a bottle on there. Yeah. So this is the Ramjet's their annual Imperial Stout series, and they often do weird and wonderful things to it. I've got a completely different one in the fridge still. So this is their Starwood Whiskey Barrel Aged Imperial Stout that's been infused with whole coffee beans, and it's from 2019. So I've had it sitting in the fridge since 2019 in my stout drawer. And it has, the booze is really mellowed out, but the coffee's still there, and it's started to get a bit more chocolatey. And it is like, first sip, I was like, oh yeah, yep, okay, that's yeah, wow. If I'm a jittery mess by the end of it, it's like the coffee notes are huge. Like even being that old, it's like first sip, I was like, oh zing, hello, I'm awake. Let's go. Let's record. It's tasting really good. I am going to do the same. I'm going to reserve judgment until it's had a little time to warm up. I pulled it out of the fridge about 20 minutes before we sat down to record. But second sip of that, same thing. More of that chocolate's coming through. So I reckon halfway through it's going to taste like a really delicious mocha, which is going to be just what I want on a lovely Sunday afternoon.
What year was the beer released?
Well, it says 2019 on it.
Okay. So we've already tried the Ramjet 22, which was a vintage 2014-2015 brew.
Yep.
So they're barreling this shit for years before they release it. So I'm just probably drinking the 23 version then.
I can find out. I'll let it warm up a bit and maybe.
Boat Rocker hasn't even been around for that long, have they?
Surely they have.
I'm just I mean, it might be the Starwood barrels that it's coming out of.
This beer will cellar well up to 5 years. Okay. No, it doesn't say. Got a little few notes on it, but nothing about when it was actually, what year it was brewed to be then chucked in. Yeah. So I have had that in the fridge for a few years though, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 2019 release.
Yeah, there is a Ramjet 2019 in a bottle because they mostly do cans for that series. So
yeah, I could check the other one I've got.
Did you
run the
buy it
fridge
from Carwyn Cellars? We talked about Carwyn Cellars before.
I love Carwyn Cellars. I honestly cannot tell you. I don't know where I got this.
If it says 2019 on it, I'm pretty sure it is the 2019 brew. Or 2019 release. I'm looking at it now on Carwyn Cellars, ironically.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm going to enjoy this. Ciao there. Dan, what do you got?
I have the Small Gods The Ton, a 1 ton. I have no idea what that 1 ton Imperial Stout refers to. It's a 10%er because there is zero information on the can. It's just a nice, simple, sort of kind of abstract.
I was going to say it's very monolith. We were talking about cosmic horror.
Yeah, and that's kind of the feel I get from it. Is you probably can't quite see it. There's a little tiny man standing under the big cube.
Got to have him for scale.
Yeah, I really like that artwork. That is something that I would hang on my wall. It evokes weirdness.
We fucking nailed it. Can I steal the mic for a sec?
Yeah, go.
So on Untapped, they've written out the full release notes. Upon the quiet arrival of the ton, the world seemed to fold into an eerie stillness. It hovered, a massive black cube with edges that seemed to stretch into the unknown, its gravity a silent call, pulling everything yet touching nothing. Its presence was an enigmatic whisper, a ghostly allure that seemed to come from the folds of another realm. The oddity of the ton, with its silent, immeasurable immensity, was a mystery that beckoned, yet remained an untouched enigma, a vague silhouette in time, a question without answer.
So that is another beer description that says fucking nothing about the product, but I like it.
They do go on. I just wanted to, because it's quite long and I don't want to spend 15 minutes reading, but the ton is an Imperial Stout, full stop. This huge and viscous dark beer features a robust base of 1,000 kilograms of New Zealand malts, bringing an array of complex dark malt characters. As this decadent and indulgent beer warms in your glass, it reveals elegant and integrated flavors of roast, dark chocolate, dark fruit, burnt toffee, caramel, toasted rye bread, brown sugar, and porridge. This is reinforced by a smooth and warming boozy finish and top notes of bramble and blackberry jam from a judicious addition of British hops.
I agree with about half of that.
Couldn't ask for a broader, like a bigger description.
Yeah, I guess it's going to be interesting to see how this warms up, actually, if they're talking about dark fruits. I'm not really getting any of that at the moment. Their sweet, jammy finish with the choice of hop there, you do get that, but it's really delicate. The definitely the dark chocolate. It's not a coffee heavy flavored like a dark roasted barley, which has those coffee notes to it. It's definitely not heavy on that for the stout. The booze to start with, because it was, because it was quite cold, the booze didn't really show too much to start with. The first sip I had, I'm like, wow, that's a really well-masked 10%. But now it's sat there for sort of 5-10 minutes. It's opening up more, and that booze is coming through, but it's not taking away. It's adding to the overall complexity from it. Definitely agree with their burnt rye bread. You have that burnt spice, that sort of burnt bready, spicy character that rye can give. It's really, really enjoyable. It's going to be a really nice one to sit here and drink for the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Nice. I'll tell you what, my last sip, I wouldn't have called it cedar or sandalwood had I not read it, but you can definitely taste sweet wooden notes through the beer now, which I think is really cool.
I found out, I did my research. It was brewed in 2019, was aged in the Starwood barrels for 6 months.
Nice.
And they said it's 5 years, so I've drunk it just in time. Well done, Tom. Pat on the
back. Danny, you reserving your score as well?
Yeah. I think I'll just hold off till I finish the glass at least.
Yep.
But it's starting very well.
Cool. All right, let's kick off with the topic at large. I think we're obviously going to talk about Kratos quite a lot, and I think the core here is what games nailed character development to the point where it was central to the game's success, whether or not it was exclusively, the reason for the game's success or not. It was, one of the core tenets of the game being considered good. I think really just trying to summarize what we were talking about before.
And Kratos is a bit of an outstanding character because there's not too many video game characters that have held the path from their original release 15 years ago or whenever the first one came out. I can probably
2005.
Okay. Almost
he utters
20
boldly.
years. Almost 20 years.
I did my
No
research.
character has really continued on that springs to mind from start to finish for 20 years.
There's tons. But
It's me, a Mario.
Yeah, but hey, on a consistent basis, Kratos from the start, from when we resaw him appear in 2018, is the same. Kratos. I say this in loose quotation marks because we're going to talk about how he isn't the same Kratos, but he is the same Kratos from that very first game all the way through. It's a consistent character across.
He has memories of those first games. Yeah. Solid Snake came up when I was doing some research, but I haven't played enough Metal Gear Solid to be able to verify that. But I've played 3 games, and then a bunch of Final Fantasy characters and a bunch of other games that I haven't played personally. Final
Fantasies are always there's some Final Fantasy moments that I'm sure Ed right now, as he's listening to this, is screaming into his phone as I'm going to butcher this. But I often find that a lot of their character developments are a bit harder to track or to follow with. A lot of it seems to be lost in translation.
Yeah, welcome to Japanese RPGs.
Yeah. That's a real shame for us as non-Japanese native speaking people. But it's like, I think you lose a lot of that when they do translate it. And there's some particularly weird moments across the series, but there are some fantastic moments. Like Sue and I were talking about, like Final Fantasy X, still one of the all-time great games. In terms of the roles those characters play. But but no, I think let's start off with Kratos because he's the big one, the big boy.
So Pete, what did you think about his final development at the end of Valhalla?
I think they, ironically, going back to what Jaffe said, they had nowhere else to go. With what they had done, they had it had run its course. The whole father reinventing himself and dealing with the pain and the anguish and the guilt and all the other emotions that wrapped up with his original trilogy worth of memories. I think the idea of acceptance and evolution was the only place they really could go to move into another chapter. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Valhalla. The storyline elements were really cool. The game mechanics were okay. I mean, I didn't hate them. I didn't love them. They got stale pretty quickly, but I mean, look, it was a DLC. It was fucking free, right? And in order for them to make it free, they needed to keep dev costs down. But yeah, I think as a character, I'm a bit excited about where they're going next. But I also think that they could have taken it in other directions into other pantheons. I probably would have been more excited if they'd acknowledged his Greek roots. There's some Greek elements in the latest DLC. They've done the hell out of Norse mythology. If they had introduced like Ra coming out of the fucking ground at the end, that would have been sick.
Oh, no. Nah. Oh, I hate that. Oh.
Take us into another pantheon of gods is kind of my point.
Which Tyr did. Tyr did that anyway.
Yeah.
Tyr's weapons did that.
Yeah.
That teased the element of the other pantheons in there. But if they'd just done almost been like a weird trailer that you played through, I think it would have completely changed my experience with that game. Well, that DLC particularly.
Yeah, I don't know. My description would be very ham-fisted because I mean that's a very AC Origins DLC god. Like you had to fight Ra, I don't think it was Ra. One of the gods came up out of the fucking sand. He was huge, but like if you could do it a lot better, you could just have one of the Egyptian gods scream at him for some slight that we've not heard about before, and pull him into that world for the next game. I don't know.
They if you get a chance to read the comic that's set in between 3 and 2018, it does allude to the fact that he did end up in the Nile region and
Didn't
whether
know
or not he destroyed the Egyptian pantheon or it really dealt with them. It seemed more like he was just wandering lost, but ended up there because he sees a vision of Athena like near the Nile, and it implies that he spends time there.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I think the way they did Tyr's weapons, all being from different cultures, indicating like his travels and stuff, was an allude to they're going to explore more pantheons, and whether or not they do it in the same style of, inevitably Kratos ends up destroying that pantheon, and what that message is from the developers, or if it's going down that last line where it ends up and it's like he is the god of hope now as opposed to the god of war, and what that could mean, like how they take that to the next level.
But I'm just conscious. We need to throw back to Dan, because Dan, you asked me a question and we've kind of answered and need to go back to you. But just on that though, the whole God of Hope, God of War thing, he's still the God of War. He's sitting on the council as God of War, and it was more an acknowledgement that by becoming the God of War in the Norse council, he's responsible for setting the terms of war and ensuring that it doesn't spread chaos. And so it's almost inevitable that there will be more war, but he can minimize the damage or harm it does to the broader world, was what I took away.
Which pulls back all the way to Ares from the god of war mythology, as well as Ares from Greek mythology, where he's quite haphazard. Like it just, what happens in war, and he will agitate both sides to the point where it just breaks out in all hell. As where if Kratos, they obviously do very much imply at the end of Valhalla that Kratos has turned a new page in his understanding of what, like you said, Pete, what a god of war should be, and almost bringing in a level of Geneva Convention into ancient war.
Yeah.
The Kratos Convention, and how all of that interplays into what we see going forward. I think it's a big mistake for them to. I mean, they've said the North's era is over, so that we will be moving on to another pantheon or another region after that. But to see how that character, where we are now to where it goes in the future, with him already having that hope side and linking back up with Atreus, and how he came to understand and appreciate his son at the end of Ragnarok, and has the family that he ultimately lost in the first, in the very first game. You see the flashback of him killing his first wife and daughter in an Ares-induced rage and illusion. Really brings it full circle. I mean, we saw it a little bit at the end of God of War 3, where he defeated Zeus and fell into what was some sort of afterlife, where he rejoined the spirit of his daughter and wife. And we don't really know how that continued on. Maybe Tom, the comic, explains how he ended up not in that.
Yeah, it does talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to read it now.
I'll find it for you guys. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll have to track it down and find it. So I think with how short Valhalla was and how much it actually spoke to his character and his past, compared to what we really saw in 2018 and Ragnarok, which was the development of the father-son, the relationship. The Valhalla the DLC really talks to who he was, who he used to be, rather than who he has to be, if that makes sense. In 2018, and Ragnarok, he's really still developing that relationship with Atreus, and what his wife was talking to him about building the bond with the son, as where it was just you, Mimir and Helios for all of Valhalla, or most of Valhalla. Yeah, it got a little bit of Freya and the Valkyries, but it was really Kratos central, compared to the actual mainstream games.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, put him front and center. Yeah, I mean, sorry, go, Tom.
I was just going to say, like, going back to the Jaffe thing and like the point he said, I firmly believe that the step they took with Kratos was the right one. And I firmly disagree with the assumption, or whether or not it's like exactly the words he used. I really don't think that the Greek Kratos could have continued. Like, no. I played Ascension and I loved it, but it was
already tired.
So tired. And it's now up to these developers to get us a new Kratos for a new series, a new Pantheon. But the way he was talking about, like, they shouldn't change that much. It's like that's where I have issue with what he's saying. I really like it when characters get that redevelopment when it's done well. And I think Kratos is a perfect example of this. Just because it was tired. Like, yeah, we get it, man. You scream at everything and you just destroy everything in sight. But, like, they tried to wing something in God of War 3 with Pandora and, like, having to care about someone else. But ultimately he was just like, still going to sacrifice everything for suiting my own needs and stuff.
And it's funny because, sorry, I just want to jump in before I lose this train of thought too, is the funny you should say that sacrifice anything for his, for moving his goals forward, as where 2018, he does the exact opposite. He sacrifices everything within himself. That little trip back down the river from Freya's hut to his hut to pick up the Blades of Chaos. Yeah. He is absolutely sacrificing what little bit of the soul he had left to rejoin that past he was trying to bury by picking those blades up again. Yeah. And it's just links into what you were exactly saying there, Tom. Well, that's the feeling I got from that trip. I loved that soul trip down the river.
That is one of the highlights of the entire series, is that just that one scene. And the whole, like, kind of bathing it in red, the whole way they shot it. Yeah.
And the storm, and
I think the gravity that you felt when he took out the Blades of Chaos from under the floorboards was poignant as well, because it's something. It was kind of symbolic that he had buried that part of himself, and it was being forced to come to the fore again, or boil to the surface again.
And the sheer, the way he wrapped the chains, he kind of went around one loop and pulled it taut. And then went around again, and it was this. And I mean, that is the actor, the writing, and the animation team to all tie that emotion together of that character. And you really saw something different there. And it was just between us and him. It wasn't. There wasn't somebody else there to experience it. So no matter what the other characters saw from that point onwards when he had those blades, and I know Atreus and Mimir and that commented on them, but it was just between
It was a contemplative character moment that we were observing.
Yeah, a private moment. Yeah. And I think that speaks volume for the writers of that as well, that because it is the blades are mentioned further on, and I think Atreus does say to him at one point, "Why didn't you just throw them away?" And he's like, "I tried," but it's never overdone. It's never drawn out, and it's never made this blatant thing. It's the beautiful thing of show don't tell.
Yeah.
And the blades were a symbol of the guilt and the shame and the anger. It didn't represent the guilt, the shame, and the anger itself. And so we never focus too much on. He doesn't focus too much on the blades, because it's actually what was linked to the blades that he was struggling with, not the blades themselves.
The blades themselves. Yeah. And he treats them, going back to Tom's point about Pandora and that as well. It's he almost treats them now as the blades are the means to the end.
Yeah,
like he needs those blades to save Atreus, and that is the means to the end. It's now I have to do this because I have no other choice. There is no other way out of this. So.
Yeah, and at that point in the game, there wasn't. So
no. I mean, you can't defeat the Helheim,
the Brambles,
Draugrs,
the Draugrs,
the Draugrs. Yeah. The Brambles. You can't get past the Brambles. Yeah.
I think I'm going to kill a cat. I swear to God, he's left me alone all day, and then ever since I sat down to start recording, he's been pouring at me to get on my lap.
Oh yeah, I just had to kick Jasper out. whining at the door. I was like, fuck off.
Must be that time of the afternoon. But I think kind of going back to the original topic, Kratos' character development is the reason why it's such a compelling narrative story and such a successful game, in my opinion. So, yes, he kind of continues it. It was a little bit more of the same in Ragnarok, but I never felt it was a negative thing. It needed more breathing space to tell the rest of the story.
But I mean, how would you have really, would you have done a 360 or 180 on that and tried to change the way Kratos acts for the sake of a new game? Like, they didn't do that in the original trilogy. It's Greek consistent. Kratos all the way through. It's just angry man who gets somehow angrier. But then you get to 2018 and it's like I didn't think it was in any way, shape or form less poignant than 2018 was in the way they delivered that story.
I think you get more character development out of Atreus to an extent. Like there are times when it was actually more about Atreus coming of age than it was about Kratos.
Which is a reflection of Kratos' teachings to him. Yeah. And the way he's letting him grow. Yeah.
You're right. It's an extension of the development we established in 2018. You're just seeing it through different character.
Jaffe makes one point that he says if the 2018 game was pitched with those exact characters and Kratos the way he was without the history of the previous games,
it wouldn't have worked.
He goes, it wouldn't have worked. But the whole point is the way that it is and the path and the story that it tells is because of those previous games.
I disagree
superfluous
with that point. Yeah,
it's a ridiculous point.
Spawn, we don't get the first 3 trade paperbacks covering his life as a cop. It's fucking flashbacks told after the fact, after he's made the pact with the devil to get the powers. You can start a character with this whole shame and vengeance and anger and all the rest of it. And then, yes, you do have to deal with it through good storytelling as to what is that thing. Like, we need to unpick it and understand it. But, yeah, you don't have to... Yeah, I disagree with his point.
I think it's still... like.
I also think it would have worked as
100%.
Yeah.
There would have... That was
my point.
But not have had the impact that it's had. There is 100%. There would have. I reckon it's probably 50% or more of the player base that came in on 2018 had never played the original God of War games. It's got to be upwards of that percentage, is my guess. So they're coming in with no knowledge or limited knowledge of what has before, and we get enough of who he was through the story.
Do we even meet his wife in the previous games? I don't think we do.
No,
sorry.
No. She's ethereal in a dream when he goes into the light of Alfheim, but you don't. She talks to him, but you don't.
Are we talking
see
about Norse wife or Greek wife? We should probably have
Norse wife.
Oh, Norse wife.
So you open the game with him building a pyre for his wife.
She's wrapped up, and they get the ashes. Yeah,
who we've never met. So that's I mean, to me, that was an interesting way to start a new chapter by closing a chapter we never saw. We didn't get to see the wife. We didn't get to see the relationship unfold. We didn't get to see how she interacted with Atreus growing up.
LaFay too.
LaFay?
Faye. He calls her Faye most of the time, but her full name's LaFay.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
I think it's longer than that as well.
But the point is, you can certainly start a story with existing history. And in fact, unless you're telling the story of a child, you have to. Like, the character already has a personality and you have to stay true to it. Because if it's not consistent, then you end up with a game where there is no personality in the character.
Which is, again, but they did that in God of War 1, the original God of War 1.
They've done that in thousands of games. Yeah, exactly, there's no personality.
But it was this was 2018 was different. Like, God of War 1 from memory had the voiceover introduction. It has the thing that they do at the start of movies where they've got to do the monologue catch up from a Galadriel or somebody else to get everybody up to speed.
You kill the Hydra from memory, and then you do the first bit, and you're just like, you get into Greece, and then there's something happens there that makes it go cool, and it's the old lady who does the
Yeah. So it's not at the start. It's after you kill the Hydra, is it? It's been
I think
decade
it's
more since I played that game.
the Hydra fight. Yeah.
Yeah, you could be right there. You're probably right.
Because he talks with Athena on the ship. It's all coming back to me now. Oh, wow, that was good. Good job, Coffee. Well done.
Yeah, I mean,
so you don't get that backstory monologue. It's literally starts with Kratos press R2 to swing the axe and cut a tree down. Why is this muscle-bound old man swinging an axe, cutting a tree down with a glowing handprint on it? Like,
what the fuck is Teal'c doing?
Yes, well, it doesn't look like Teal'c, but yeah, it's a brilliant way to roll through a game and have so much development for a character in the first. Before you even press a button with nothing said, it has character development from where we saw him previously.
Yeah. But I think but that's how it starts. But the rest of the game, and to be honest, the rest of both games is just continuous character development, and that is what drives the narrative forward. It is the reason why the games were enjoyable, was because we were playing through that development and kind of witnessing it unfold, and the world around him or around them driving that development into them. I mean, they weren't, they had antagonists that were driving that character development, but it was all internal development.
Yeah, well, you wonder how much further in the relationship there with Kratos and Atreus if Balder hadn't turned up and set off basically Balder turning up sparked Ragnarok. So
that whole chain of events.
Yeah, just with the stranger coming up that you didn't even know his name, and so you wonder how that continued on.
So do we disagree with Jaffe? I think I do. I disagree with Jaffe.
Yeah, I've only watched those 2 videos, and
I've never met the guy either. But
I've never met the guy either. Yeah.
He's welcome to join us on Pixels and Pints if
hey man, if he picks us up.
I'm going to be atting the shit out of him for these videos.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I don't know. It just I see it as more of a like someone took away his toy and now he's angry.
No,
he's a little mad. Like, I don't know. I don't get that. You talk about his being like the way.
I don't think there's any vindictiveness in it.
I don't know. That second video, I thought he came across just as arrogant and as petty as he did in the first one. And some of the bits where he's talking
I'm
about,
not adding him now. Thanks, Tom.
Nah, fuck him. I'll take him on. I played his game. I've fucking given him money, so fuck the guy. If he wants to come on and defend himself, let him do it.
I'd love to have a conversation with him to see.
Yeah, I'd like to sit down and do it. But I just think he was contradicting himself a lot in those videos for me. It just, I don't know. It didn't. I don't think he defended himself well. I still don't agree with him.
It would be good that was what he was doing was not what we do. So he didn't have somebody. He had, I think he had his subscribers in a live chat that were saying
he was on
Twitch.
Speaking.
So it would be really good to. I don't know if there's a video out there that is him talking to somebody and actually saying, "Okay, well, you said you loved 2018. Where would you go after that? If you had to lead into the events of Ragnarok, what would you be doing?"
You're right. I haven't seen any interactive conversations either. It's just him. It's a monologue.
So definitely add him, because if we can get a four-way conversation going.
I just think, the reason I disagree with him is if we'd gotten another Wolverine game, if we just treated the first 3 or 4 games, if you include Ascension, as the Wolverine character, if we'd gotten a 4th game...
Which I also don't fucking agree with, but we're not going to go down the Wolverine
I don't either.
But if we'd gotten another cookie-cutter God of War character with no development, just angry man, just a button masher...
Yeah.
In the 2018 game climate, I don't think it would have been nearly as successful. It won Game of the Year, for fuck's sake.
I mean, Did 2005 did win Game of the Year too. Bunch of But again, it was. I think that's a really important thing, that it was a product of its time. Like 2005, you think about some of the games that were out then. Like it was, like some of them, like especially more violent titles that were out. Like that was a lot of the appeal around it. Was it like, it told a decent a decent story, but it was also, you're some super strong. It was before Marvel was marveling, and like you got to pick dudes up and rip them in half. Like you felt like the God of War. Like they did what they set out to do. What it said on the box.
It did win. Both games won Game of the Year.
Yeah.
And 2018 re-release was more successful than any game in the original franchise.
But the area of that media has changed as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the player base has probably swelled considerably since the last set of games too.
And I mean, absolutely not to throw any shade on those early games. I fucking love them. I love the storylines that come into, and they play into the Kratos character at the time.
Yeah, but doesn't
these ones?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, does it? But when you compare it to something like Diablo, right? It's another button masher, dungeon delver. Diablo has stayed true to itself from the start, and even whilst they've added modern, quality of life changes, Diablo 4 has a hardcore player base, but is ultimately just a copy of 3, which was a copy of 2, which was a copy of 1. I don't feel like it was nearly as popular.
No, I mean, as someone who played the shit out of Diablo 2, I struggled through Diablo 3, and as soon as I finished the main story, I was like, see you later.
Because it's fucking repetitive.
I haven't touched Diablo 4, and I don't think I ever will.
But also, what's the name of the characters in there? I mean, do they even have names? Are they just
cleric?
Yeah, I was going to say. It's just generic RPG, yeah.
But I mean, I guess, I maybe I don't have a valid point there then. I just felt like, we've got some other long-running franchises.
I know what you're trying to say, and I agree with that point, in that it is just, it was repetitive. This mixed
it
up. This pivoted to the times and the audience.
It's funny now, like it's ever since we got those first ones, the like Souls-like and everything like that, they were the new games that came out after that were called God of War clones. Yeah, like Castlevania at the time, something of Shadows, Shadow
of the Colossus.
No, it was called
different game.
Yeah, but they were that style of game was a God of War clone, and now that we've gotten 2018, like they're now God of War clones again. If you've got that combat over the shoulder, the heavy and light attacks done to the triggers now, not to the square, circle, triangle buttons. They're now God of War clones. 2018 God of War clones. So it is now once again a genre-defining game, and that can't just be down to the gameplay is incredibly solid in both the original and what we've got now, products of their time, but the story and the character and the attachment that you have to for so many of the player base to go out and play them has now opened this door for more developers to go, yeah, we need to do that, but with our characters, with our IP, we need to do that. And even down to people comparing the enhanced version of Witcher 3 to God of War, because as you're walking around, the camera is much closer to the character in the same position over the right shoulder as it is for Kratos. So,
but I think the other takeaway for game developers watching 2018 and Ragnarok unfold were, or be as successful as they were, is hopefully a focus on narrative storytelling in games again. Because I think that's what we want.
Highly interactive storytelling.
Because I think we've all gotten fucking sick of hearing the same bullshit stories from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we're looking for stories to be told to us in other mediums. Because we're not getting a whole lot out of Hollywood, you could argue.
And it's got to be that refocus on the character, pull back. I think this is going to be a dumb comment, but smaller stories, because you can't get much of a bigger story than Ragnarok in Norse mythology.
True,
but character
smaller story, smaller scope. There you
go. But character driven, not event driven.
Yeah,
the actual event of Ragnarok happening within Ragnarok, the God of War Ragnarok game, was, in my mind, was actually too short. I thought that whole section was too short. Yeah. It didn't feel epic enough to me. It felt like we're building up. Okay, well, that was just ejaculating dust.
It was which is a brilliant title for the episode. If only we could get away with it.
Definitely going to get Jaffe on now. Come try to think about ejaculating dust. Fuck's sake.
Here we are covering David Jaffe. Ejaculating dust is the name of the episode. I think you should get George R.R. Martin on that too. I felt it was less consequential than draining the river basin in the first game. Certainly to the gameplay and to the story.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I agree with you. It didn't last long enough, and it wasn't consequential enough.
But I think it's also reflective of the player base, like you talked about. There's whether or not we can say how many new players came to the series with 2018 or not. We don't have those numbers, but they're getting to that stage now. Like if they're let's say they're the fuck.
Sorry.
Well, that was at me for a second. No, Tom, shut up.
Naughty boy.
I've never seen Loki push his face against the screen enough for the whole screen to warp on its stand. So you got a smack. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I know. I was just talking about if you think about a player base that's growing up with this and like maturing as gamers, they're all the kids that got the first Call of Duty Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
And now they've aged up enough and they're the ones who are desiring that story, like you were saying. And if they're not getting it through Hollywood, then
they're not getting it from Call of Duty games, I can tell you that.
No. The plot lines are thin at best. But yeah, it's that like the way that, because I played a lot of those ones and it was like, yeah, the story was decent enough. It was, it's a war story, but it's like, but it always left you wanting more, and I couldn't be bothered getting on the multiplayer kind of side of things. And I think there's enough.
You weren't getting any story there, mate. I can tell you that. Other than getting
you got some stories. You got some stories in multiplayer. Yeah, I got told some things, but yeah, no, like they've played those campaigns and they're left wanting for an actual good story. That's where 2018 can come and take them. That's where the Uncharted series can come and take Red Dead Redemption. Like they've moved in as matured as gamers. They need this, whereas like. You can have a good story in the Greek God of War quadrilogy. It's called a quadrilogy now. I think it's actually like 7 games in the
I lost
Greek
count.
part of it. But it was still enough, like, of the time, just destroy everything, kill everything, blood, guts, sex minigames, happy days. Like that's what the player base wanted at the time. But I think now they've grown up with that and they've matured enough that they actually like, oh, cool. I still want to be able to tear a guy in half with an axe, but I also want a meaningful story, like to cut that up, to like to break up that thing. I think that's where a lot of the, let's say, mid-20s to 40 player base, which is a considerable part of those player bases, is that's where they're at and that's what they want. And yeah, and that's why it was so successful, I think. But yeah.
Yes, do we want to stay on Game of Thrones, or do you want to move on to some other characters? Because there are certainly some other games.
I don't remember talking about Game of Thrones, but yep. Okay.
I'm sorry. God of War. I don't even know where they came from. It's not like I'm looking up anything. You did mention
George R. Martin for some reason.
Yeah, that must be it. It's just a Freudian slip and my Alzheimer's. Do we want to
start? Well, Dan will come back in, but let's start with one of your characters you wanted to talk about.
Or we can start with one of yours, because well, let's start with mine because Dan's played Plague Tale and I haven't. So
has he?
I believe so.
It's too many rats. He wouldn't like it.
Or maybe it was. Yeah, okay, maybe I'm wrong.
I've definitely played it because it was the rat one. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ellie from The Last of Us 2.
Yes.
I don't count her in the first game because she's almost a passenger on that story. I mean, Joel is there to protect her, but sorry, Dan, we've moved off God of War. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that topic before we do?
No, I heard you say Joel, so I assumed you'd moved on. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, look, Joel went through his own journey, and that's certainly
number 1 is Joel's story. Number 2 is Ellie's story. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think John's was interesting and complex, and it's what made the game, right?
Close enough. I was going to let it go.
The fuck did I say John? I'm thinking Marston. We're getting on to John later. Joel's was a great development of character in that he was an anti-hero at the start of the game, and through the course of the original game became a father figure, and it was very much coming to terms with grief and loss. But I think Ellie in The Last of Us 2 her grief and loss was a lot more raw. It happened more recently in terms of the game's storyline, and so it came with anger and vengeance that Joel had probably hung up at some point before the first game. I mean, the reality. Sorry,
and she didn't get to grow up in a pre-apocalyptic world where it's like you would have had ways to deal with that if Joel had that from previous things. Yeah,
true. But I think, and this is full spoilers for the two games that have been out now for I think over a decade.
Well, the second one just got re-released, so
yeah. But the first one was re-released like 2 years ago, and it had been out for 13 years by that stage. But so in the first, I mean, Joel loses his daughter at the start of the apocalypse or the zombie apocalypse, and therefore a lot of what he dealt with in terms of transporting Ellie was dealing with that loss after he had kind of buried it away in a box.
He'd cut it off. He didn't want a daughter again. He didn't want a family again. He just wanted to be him. Yeah.
But I don't even think it was that he hadn't dealt with the loss of his original daughter, like his actual biological daughter. And then having to deal with Ellie and interact with Ellie, and Ellie being the complete innocent that she was, forced him to come to terms with the original pain in a way that allowed him to become a father figure to Ellie. And I thought that was, let's be real, if that storyline wasn't as compelling as it was, I don't think we would have had a game. Or at least a game that we enjoyed playing as much as we did. And I liken it to God of War for that reason.
I think you're right. I mean, the interaction, I haven't played 2. I've watched, I caught up with the overall story and character development in 2 this afternoon because I knew it would come up.
Oh, fuck. That would have ruined it for you. Sorry.
What's that?
There's a big spoiler for 2 fairly early on, about a third or a quarter of the way into the game.
I'm never going to play it.
Okay.
Also, I think we already spoiled it for him years ago when we played it.
Yeah.
He died?
The interaction between Joel and Ellie. The interaction with Joel and Ellie and that character development between the two and the relationship development is what drives you forward in the sections where you're not focusing on human or
the stealth and
or the combat elements outside of those combat sections. Is they're constantly talking to each other and slowly developing that relationship with each other, and it would have been nowhere near as compelling and I mean, it's got to be one of the original titles too that had a constant companion that was driving the story forward. Before that, there wasn't too many games that had a constant companion.
Yeah, they were usually a game mechanic rather than a narrative element.
Or if they were a narrative element, they were minimal. But they're not in the same light that, like, there's plenty of duos that you played as over in the years, but there's always one was either silent.
Yeah, fuck Tails. No one gives a shit about Clank. I totally agree. Sorry to cut you off there, Tom.
It's exactly, you're right.
I think going on to some game mechanics that we've gone on to and some of our previous talking earlier today, it could be something that's now being overdone a little bit.
Yeah.
But
the good thing about Ellie was the constant character development, which we have talked about. The constant character interaction was meaningful. It wasn't just filler or repetitive lines that you heard which drove you insane. It was all they'd written so much.
If you hadn't fallen in love with Ellie's character in the first game, I don't think you would have given as much of a shit about the process that Joel was going through and the attachment that he felt for her. Wouldn't have felt nearly as believable. He was falling in love with a daughter character, and it was told through the lens of this beautiful innocence in this fucking broken world. And I think if you couldn't relate to him falling in love with her as a protective guardian, then it wouldn't have worked. And to me, that is the masterstroke that is that game. It had to make you want to buy into her and then him in that order. But I think the second game, I think it took a very different turn, and it's almost looking at the first trilogy of God of War of 7 games compared to the second couple is The Last of Us 1 versus The Last of Us 2, because she takes a complete tailspin after Joel dies in the second game. And then suddenly this innocence, she's I'm hesitant to use the word blossoming, but she is going through puberty. She's dealing with the kinds of puberty blues that everyone goes through as a teenager at the start of the second game, but there's still a level of innocence there that she's now a teenage girl coming to her womanhood, and then the whole thing just gets completely interrupted with Joel's death, and her entire psyche pivots on a
brutal death.
Yeah, and that she fucking witnesses firsthand. Yeah, and then her entire psyche just breaks into vengeance and anger and loss and grief, and she has no tools to deal with that.
No.
And then we watch this character that we fell in love with as an innocent in the first game turn into, dare I say, a monster in the second game, where I really struggled with a lot of the choices that she made in the narrative, and yet it never felt inconsistent as a character. You could understand why she was doing the dumb shit that she was doing. She was blinded by that vengeance. It drove...
massively hurting, especially when you get into the underlay of the story that, her and Joel had kind of drifted apart and fighting, and she was left with, as you said, all that guilt, and then now a new double down on rage and anger. When she'd already had her, and I guess that's the thing as well, she'd already had her innocence stolen which is, I think, is a great run through of the first game, is Joel's always trying to protect her innocence. Why he's like, you're not fighting, if they you get away, and then she has to kill that dude, and it's like,
who was trying to rape her? Let's be clear. It was almost a literal loss of innocence as well.
Yeah, but it's just he was always trying to protect her from that, and that was his journey to protect her, and then he had to accept the thing. But then obviously for her, she started out the game in a weird spot, like you said, and purely as well because she'd started to kind of piece together that maybe Joel lied at the end of the first game.
Yeah.
About the whole Firefly situation. So she'd lost trust in this father figure she never thought she'd have, but had grown to absolutely need and want. And then also got him absolutely ripped out of her life like that. It was like
it deals with unfinished business well.
Yeah, it was difficult to watch because you felt that pain, and it felt uncomfortable for me as a player.
But and to character development as a main plot or a main driver for a video game, it's not just her journey, it's Abby's as well. And a couple of interactions at the very start of the game really put these two characters into almost the same starting lineup, where they're both seeking vengeance against the other for wrongs that the other doesn't even know.
Yeah.
And propels both characters forward to an inevitable kind of climax where they meet again. And the character development of Abby as a person and her dealing with it ended up almost overshadowing Ellie's dealing with that pain. Now, I mean, could you argue that it's a deeper pain perhaps, but just getting to the point on the beach at the end of The Last of Us 2 where Ellie's finally understood the error of her ways. She's understood that seeking vengeance to the exclusion of everything else is going to only result in further loss for her. She's come to accept Joel's death. She seems to have learnt everything that she needed to learn on her journey, and then goes full fucking rage at the end anyway, and it almost kills them both. Just, that was the hardest part for me playing that game, was just watching her sink back into vengeance again, like she hadn't learned anything along the way.
Yeah.
Oh, notwithstanding the fact that she also lost her first lover. So when we talk about loss of innocence, she had also dealt with grief. She was dealing with grief before Joel died and was kind of processing that still as well, along with guilt and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think, to me, Ellie's journey, I didn't agree with every choice that she made, but I never once questioned the writers. And to me, that made it... that's what told me it was compelling, in the sense that I didn't agree with every choice she made, but it was consistent enough with her psyche that I never said the writers fucked up. It was Ellie fucked up.
Yeah.
Which to me is... Yeah.
Like when you watch a TV show and you're just screaming at the screen, don't do that, you dumb idiot, and then they do it anyway. It's like... But you never go
fucking write a sternly worded letter to the writers either.
No. I mean,
well, we complain about it on here if it's done poorly.
If it's executed poorly.
Yes, that's what I mean.
But it was executed excellently. Anyway, I think that's another game to add to the list. Sorry, Tom.
No, I was going to say it's a perfect lead into Plague Tale: Innocence, because it's that same thing of as the title implies, losing innocence. It's been struck by a plague, and because you guys haven't played it,
No,
Dan never will, because ratty boys.
Yeah,
why does it always have to be rats?
But it's the same thing there. It's a sister and a brother. A brief rundown of the story. Sister and brother living in medieval France. There's a conspiracy against her noble family, and suddenly she's struck into a plague hitting France of rats, like a literal plague. And she's got to protect her brother in that, as they're being hunted down by the church, Spanish Inquisition, that kind of thing. But it's, again, you're watching a very well written young character being forced against their will. And I think anytime that's done and it's written well, there were no like almost like those weird hero movie moments where they stand up and like almost like Neo like flex off the dust, like that kind of thing. It was all like really well slowly built up. You see the character have to form these ideas. How am I going to survive? What will I do to survive? But how can I still keep my younger brother innocent, even though he's going through what he's going through? Very much trying to be spoiler free for this. But again, it's when you see, especially like a young innocent character, just having everything ripped away from them. If that's written well and not overly cliched, I think it's going to lead into. I always find that really leads into a really well written story. Sometimes they do. You have stories like that which just start becoming too cliched, and you're just like, okay, well, now you've lost me. But that's another game I would add to this thing that I never thought I'd get into that game, because the gameplay style, it's mainly stealth. That's not old Tommy boy. Leroy Jenkins over here. He just runs in screaming. Yeah,
about as subtle as a bull in a china shop most of the time. But to me, that felt like a Thief-esque kind of game, set in roughly the same era, and as you say, stealth-based game.
Yeah, but stealth-based, but also like stealth survival almost in a weird way. And it's a little bit different to Thief, but yeah, I can see the similarities for it. But it's just, it's that combined, like, for someone who doesn't really like a stealth-based game, like I've never gone into Metal Gear or any of those things. It's taken me how long to finally get it stuck into the Assassin's Creed series? And even then, I'm not stealthy at all. But like, yeah, going back and playing that, and I'm really keen to play the sequel of it. It's just, it's the characters that drew you in. And like Al said when he talked about it, he just finished it. You walked away like a little harrowed afterwards. You're like, it was fucking hectic. Like it gets really hectic because it's just such a really well written tale. And yeah, if you can get past the old ratty boys, I do highly recommend it.
Isn't it interesting that we've spoken about the Last of Us 1 and 2 and Plague's Tale, which goes across two games as well, and you've really talked about the development of young characters being thrown into situations that the young ones of that era, those ages, shouldn't be subjected to, and just the massive juxtaposition against what we spoke about for the first 45 minutes. Kratos, who literally put himself in this position. Well, I guess his birthright was a little bit different, being a demigod, but he made the deal with Ares. He made the dominoes start to fall with how his life went.
And then when he was losing control, he tried harder to exert it and made it worse.
Yeah, and then you've got these young characters coming through, and will they then get to this point where they realize, and this is what I commented to you earlier, Pete, about where Ellie is now is like Kratos in the original trilogy. Where are we going to... The Naughty Dog has said they are going to make a part 3, but it's not...
The Last of Us was always written as a trilogy in mind.
Yeah. So it will be very interesting to see how 2 ended and her path ended into, and how much it had destroyed her life and how much she had to come to terms with the path that she'd chosen, and what sort of character she will be moving forward. And I think, once again, I'm talking about her in a real person sense, not as in how will they write her going forward? Because these characters have developed their own personalities. They are absolutely figments of people's imagination, but they have brought these. They're so well written, and the interaction that we have with them across the 3 games, the game series that we've spoken about, it ties you to these characters in a way that they have their own personalities, and you go, it's kind of like watching a documentary. Like, it's kind of like, what's the next part of their life going to show for us? It's not what are they going to write them to be.
I mean, look, and I felt like Jaffe was a little overly defensive when he talked about his how did he describe it? His bona fides on, yes, I have done a fucking English lit degree and I have studied poetry, and I felt like it was overly defensive, and he was clearly responding to some specific hate mail that he hadn't actually shared with us. But one of the things that he talks about is, a lot of the time, a good story, if you strip away all of the setting and the background and the events happening to the characters, a lot of the times character development should be about a moral that you can apply to your everyday life, even if it's set in a Lord of the Rings kind of world. The through line should be something that applies to you every day, and that really talks to exactly what I think we've talked about so far, and we'll talk about at the end with John Martston, in the sense that, if you pursue vengeance at all costs, it will cost you dearly. That was something that Kratos learned. It also it's funny because they are both very similar when you really break it down. God of War and The Last of Us, there's both lots of story are written around vengeance and the cost of vengeance, and the cost of grief, and how people respond to grief in different ways, and frequently are destructive in the way that they deal with it. God, how do we end up so highbrow? We should talk about these beers again.
That's the whole idea of these uplates, Pete.
I thought they were just to get drunk and talk shit.
Can I remind you the phrase ejaculating dust? We are in no way highbrow.
Oh, fuck, I came close to that. Spraying that all over my screen. Yeah. Should we talk about these beers again and give them a score?
I think we should, yes. I finished mine. Yep. That was sensational. That is beautiful.
Sensational.
If anyone out there has this bottle sitting in their cellar or sitting in their fridge, it is perfect to drink now, which is one of those, great things about cellaring beer sometimes, is I think if I would have had that, seeing some like when I looked it up on Untapped and seeing some early reviews and stuff, it was a lot sharper. It was a lot like the booze really came straight out and hit you in the face. Whereas this was deliciously not mellow. I'm feeling a great, buzz right now. But it just became a really rich chocolate and coffee, smooth experience the whole way through. The booze is there definitely. But not in an unenjoyable way for something that's 11.2%. It's not a small beer. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's got 5 stars on it, so I feel like it's really trying to push me that way. So in an I think it for having aged it, it's held up really well. I'm going to give it a 4.75. It's not a perfect beer. I would have liked probably a bit more of, in the balance they had of the chocolate and coffee, I would have liked a bit more of that, the sharpness of the coffee to still come through, or whether or not it came through originally and I've missed it. But it is an excellent stout. They said they aged it in Starwood red wine barrels. I don't know if that was meant to give any tanniny flavors. I didn't get those at all. I didn't get any, and sometimes you have something that's barrel aged in a sherry or port cask or red wine barrel. You get that tannin flavor and sensation. I didn't get any of that. But 4.75, really good. If you could find one, you walk into a bottle shop and see it, just grab it.
Well, Carwin Cellars has some apparently. They're still selling it online.
Grab it. Delicious. I might grab more.
Dan?
Yeah, mine's warmed up really nicely as well. The flavor has continued to evolve. The real dark chocolate cocoa characters are really present. I do get a little bit of that dark fruit that they were talking about before too. It's got a nice astringent bitterness from the black malts. It's definitely a 4.75 for me. It's a damn near perfect, but I'm going to pull my usual card. I would have liked a bit of like hop bitterness in there.
Yeah.
It does have a sweeter finishing palate to it, so a bit higher. It's definitely got the malt astringency bitterness that I was talking about, but a little bit higher hop bitterness. But that's me too. So
yeah,
I'm calling that a 4.75 because it is a fucking good beer as well, and I kind of wish I had another one for afterwards.
Nice. Mine has. I'm not going to give it as high a score. I'm going to say that up front. So on the nose, I get a lot more. There's a touch of chocolate, but there's a lot more ethanol. You get that real booziness on the nose, but it has masked the flavor 100%. And the problem is it's masked it with, and thank you, I couldn't remember the word, but you nailed it, Dan, astringency. It is that real sharp bitterness that reminds me a little bit of soy sauce. I don't know if it's yeast autolysis or something else as it's aged, but
it would be, yeah. Especially in barrels too.
Yeah. But it also has developed a note that it didn't have at the start. So I've lost a lot of the coffee. I've lost, although that kind of that bitterness you get from coffee is still there, which is what I put down to astringency. I was getting wood notes through the middle, 10 minutes after we cracked the beers. Now all I get is pepper jack. It's just pepper, pepper, pepper. And it's not a bad thing by itself. One of my favorite, I know this is taking us a little bit off topic for a second. One of my favorite wines, it was probably not designed to taste, it was a Pinot that probably wasn't designed to taste as peppery as it was, but it had this real strong peppery note through the middle. And I can't find that wine for love or money, but I would love to have bought 3 or 4 more to cellar. This, though, I just think it's cool that it's layered, and Brick Lane usually don't miss on their stouts. They're pretty well known for their stouts outside of their core range. But to me, this just fell apart. The layers fell apart over time. And so to me, this is going to be a 3.75. Ooh. Which is still a pretty fucking good score when you consider it's out of 5. Yeah. Just usually I'm used to the Trilogy of Fear knocking it out of the park. Anyway.
I did fine. I've still got 3 of those in my stout drawer. So there you go. Happy days.
Which ones? Trilogy of Fear?
The first 3. I've still got the cans.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So I've still got 2023's Trilogy of Fear. I don't know if I'm going to save it for you fuckers or just do one in each of the next 3 upload episodes. So I haven't decided yet.
Mate, go nuts.
Do you want to move on to John Martston from Red Dead?
Do we want to just call it here and seems to have doubled back on our beer reviews, or do we want to throw another 30 minutes on this?
Well, it's up to you because I obviously can't talk about him because I have not played it. And you'd have to probably be spoiler free because I want to play it.
Yeah, and
you can't talk about it without spoilers.
Yeah, and he plays a big part in 2, and that was where I was. That was probably what I was.
I know the basic story, but yeah. Oh, wait, are you talking with?
It's ironic because it lines
I was thinking of Arthur. I don't really know Arthur's story. I know the story of Red Dead 1. And I know this.
Well, that's all we were talking about. So Red Dead 2 is more focused on Arthur.
Yeah.
So Red Dead 2's Arthur.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Arthur
and John's
is Arthur's the main character for most of it.
Yes.
Most of it.
Well, Arthur's the main character for most of the... Sorry, John's the main character for most of the first game.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I mean. And we're trying to be completely vague here because Tom hasn't finished 1.
Yeah, I hadn't hung a hat on it.
Oh, no, but I know what happens at the end of 1. I don't know. I don't really know the story of 2.
Why don't you tell us what you know before we go any further?
Guns.
No, genuinely.
Because at the end of 1, John dies in the shootout outside his family home.
Okay, so that was probably the big. Yes, that's probably the big spoiler we were aiming to kind of avoid.
Again, the game's been out for long enough, and it's my fault for not playing it.
And you play the epilogue. The epilogue is Jack, the son.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Which was never. Sorry,
in two you play Arthur for most of it, and then you play John in the epilogue.
Right.
And I never thought that we would end up with that kind of echo. Like that was somewhat unexpected in playing through RDR2, and I haven't finished the storyline. I knew a long time ago that he dies, that Arthur dies, but until they released the second game and I had that plot twist ruined for me, I never really expected it to be an echo playing 2 after 1.
Well, I mean, he's not in 1, and as John, you're hunting down Dutch's gang, and Arthur isn't there. So either Arthur's on the other side of the fucking world, or he's dead. And I'm pretty sure in those days he's dead in the life that he's living. But there's go.
But his death is quite different too. The some of the backstory and the through lines and the character development and the shit that they learn and deal with is similar, but not the same. But Arthur's death is very different to John's. John's a sudden and a direct result of the core plot points, whereas Arthur's was tangential. Like his cause of death, I mean, it was TB. He was dying of TB. He was diagnosed.
My fault. That might have been something that I might have dodged over there.
Sorry.
It's like
Tom.
Ghostbusters all over again.
And no, he doesn't die of TB. He dies of lead poisoning. Thank you very much.
Oh, it just gets better. No, like
Sorry,
I said,
Tom.
it's fine. No, I knew he died. I knew he died. I didn't know how it all went, but that's fine. It's fine. It's my fault again, not playing it. This is why we should play big stories when they come out.
Well, Pete doesn't even know, so Pete hasn't finished it. So that's why That's why I wanted to, and you haven't even finished Arthur's story, so that's why I wanted to put a pin in John Marston. And my comments on Marston were,
well, I'm going to ruin something for you. Snape kills Dumbledore.
His character through 1 is great, but he doesn't actually learn too much in 1. I feel that 2 being a prequel, he actually learns more in 2 and the epilogue of 2 than he does all through 1.
What's the time difference between the epilogue of 2 and the start of 1?
It's a straight cut.
So it's like Rogue One to A New Hope.
Yeah. It might be a couple of years, but it's not.
Oh,
It's in the Old West time. When you start 1, Jack is in his mid-teens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think in the end of 2, Jack is somewhere around 12 or 13 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So it's 2 to 3 to 4 years max, but nothing happens in that period. It's they're on the farm, then the story of 1 starts.
But to me, John Marston's story was more about he escaped the life, which are lessons he learns in the second game. So at the start of the first game, he has gotten out of scum and villainy. Excellent shirt, by the way, Tom. But then gets dragged back in and against his will, and then ends up dying as a result, essentially, of being unable to escape that life. But he got back to it grudgingly. He was blackmailed by the Pinkertons. So, I think there's still a lot of character development. I think character development drives that story, probably to a lesser extent than some of the other games that we've talked about, but it's still very much present.
And I can't talk more about his character development in 2 and why I'm calling that I think more happens in 2 for John, even though he's not the main character, until at least you and me do a one-on-one uplate.
Yeah, okay.
because it's going to be a very long time for Tom to finish 1 and 2.
I was going to say, go nuts.
Sorry about the TV, Tom.
No, it's fine. I'll be honest. If you guys want to go ahead, because I will forget.
It's, yeah.
Like,
I'm going to keep my mouth shut, actually.
I've even forgotten, I got 3 missions into the start of 1, and I started up the single player again, and I was just like, I don't remember shit. Like, so yeah, you can go nuts. Go nuts. I give you full permission.
Because I don't want to spoil it for Pete either, and because I thought the character development, and even I put John on this instead of Arthur because Mr. Whippy's out the front.
Jesus.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. We live in suburbia, man. It's there's these
I
things
can hear it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I had to stop, because it sounded like something like outside my study door, but it's down on the street. That's why I put John in the notes rather than Arthur, because Arthur's contained in the story, and his story is his character development happens. Yes, it's great, and you get to interact with it in real time. Even
but it
though
starts and finishes.
But you don't have any influence on what happens. Same with John, you don't have any influence. But
no.
Arthur's story, even though the game is quite long, is there. But with John, we saw where it ended up, and then we come back to where it started. And even obviously when they created Red Dead 1, that they didn't even have Arthur in mind. Arthur was a character that they created down the track, and they had to build his and John's relationships on top of that.
Yes.
And they are completely entwined, and Rockstar did a fantastic job in doing it. And there is even something more I want to mention about the closeness of their relationship that I don't want to say in case Pete hasn't gotten to a certain point in the game. But it's to do with John's family and how that encompasses Arthur into the family as well. And John and Arthur, so being quite vague on this, if nobody's played either Red Dead games, they're a gang of outlaws. In 2, you play John Marston, who's hunting down his old gang, as Pete said, as he's basically blackmailed into by the Pinkerton detective agency. In RDR 2, it's a prequel, and you're with Dutch Vanderlyn, and Dutch's gang is John, Arthur, and a whole bunch of others. And you're outrunning the Pinkertons and the law, and it ends up after about 30 hours just before RDR 1 starts. So it's a real Old West, but goddamn, like, the mundane shit you do in that game for the people that you are traveling and escaping the law, and that gang is their family, and they talk about it all the time.
All the time.
All the time. It is what attaches you to those characters and develops them more. So I think it's a great example of long format storytelling and character development within a single volume.
Yeah. I also think that the character development is more interesting because he's an unwilling participant in his own story.
John or Arthur?
John.
Both, actually. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but yeah. I think
in the end, Arthur is.
I think Arthur had more. I think Arthur had more agency than John. John was literally blackmailed from the start of the game of RDR 1 onwards.
Oh yeah, 1. Yeah.
I think, but to me, John's story was always more tragic in terms of he had escaped. He just wanted to raise his kid. He wanted to live his life with his wife. He'd gotten out of the game of, he'd gotten out of the game of being a villain. And
very fourth wall breaking. Sorry. Ruined Pete's train of thought there.
I think his is the more compelling story because it's a story about what happens when life happens to you and changes the course of your life without you really having much control. And as much control as you try to exert, the ending basically says you don't have a whole lot to say. You certainly didn't for him. That's what made his story a tragedy.
And it's very interesting. One of the characters, the reoccurring characters in RDR 1 is the stranger on the hill. And that very much reiterates your point, Pete, as he has no overall influence on the direction that his life's taking.
Yeah. Anyway,
because it's pre-written for him.
Yeah, it's preordained. But that's all I wanted to say on the topic.
Yeah. I think it was good. Happy?
Always.
Listeners, you happy?
They can't hear you yet.
Email us with your sternly worded letters at admin@pixelsandpints.com.au.
Cool.
Fucking hell. All right. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.